This is my video update from Prague, Czech Republic on this Saturday afternoon, October the 28th. Let's talk about some news and let's start things off with a horrific evening yesterday in Gaza. There were massive missile strikes, massive bombing of Gaza by the Israeli Defense Forces. Now, there's a complete communication, internet, media blackout. So we didn't really get much information or many videos and images from the bombing that took place yesterday evening. A few images did manage to make their way through to the interwebs, and the images that did make it onto Telegram and Twitter X. Horrific, absolutely horrific stuff that took place in Gaza yesterday evening. Absolutely horrific. And the interesting part is that according to Israeli Defense Forces, the spokesman for the IDF, it looks like this is not the ground operation, but according to them, this is an expansion. That is what they said. This is an expansion of the operation. Whatever that means, I'm not even sure what that even means, to be quite honest. Many people believe that this was indeed the beginning of the ground operations into Gaza, but the Israeli officials are signaling from their statements that this is not the case. And actually, there was I think it was a BBC journalist who was reporting from the area. I mean, he was further out from Gaza. Gaza was way in the background as he was reporting. He said that he's been speaking to Israeli officials, and they told him that this is not the beginning of the ground operation. So I don't know. I mean, it's a media blackout, so no one really knows what is going on. There are reports that Israel did send in tanks into Gaza, and depending on what report you read, either the tanks accomplished their mission, these Merkava tanks, they accomplished whatever mission they had to do as they were entering Gaza and then returned, or some of these tanks were destroyed by Palestinian resistance. Depends on what report and what analysis you read. Once again, it's impossible to confirm any of this because we have this media blackout. So how do you confirm any of this? Very different. What we're seeing in Israel and in Gaza right now is very different from the SMO, isn't it? With the special military operation, we pretty much have full transparency, a full picture as to everything that's going on. We have media embedded with both sides in the conflict in Ukraine. Internet, electricity, water, food, gas moving through Ukraine to Europe, EU leaders, collective West leaders traveling to Kiev, bridges, railways, no blockade, no blackout, nothing like that in the SMO. This what's going on in Gaza is very different than what we've seen play out over the past year and a half, almost 2 years of the SMO. And I think that tells you a lot. I think that answers a lot of questions as to why the Russians went about the SMO in the way that they did. Why was their approach so restrained, so slow, so restrained? Why did they not take out the key infrastructure from the beginning? Why didn't they take out the communication, the bridges, the railway, the internet, the food? Why did they allow this to continue when the Russians started the SMO? I think now we have a better understanding as to why, after seeing everything that happened just yesterday evening in Gaza and everything that's been unfolding over the past couple of weeks in Gaza. I think we have a clearer picture as to the approach that Russia took with the SMO and the approach that's being taken in this war in Gaza by Israel. So the Israeli defense officials, they said that in another statement, they said that they had destroyed, I think they said 150 Hamas bunkers and tunnels. But once again, how do you confirm any of this? Impossible to confirm this. Even the Associated Press and Reuters, even they are not allowed to report from Gaza. I mean, we're talking a complete media blackout. The IDF told Reuters and the AP, leave. You can't report from this area. So how do you confirm what the IDF is saying, that they destroyed 150 bunkers and tunnels of Hamas? I mean, you can't. You simply can't. The Washington Post, let me pull it up here. They're reporting that the Pentagon, the Biden White House, they are urging Israel to not go forward with the ground operation and instead to use a surgical campaign, precision strikes. That is what the Washington Post is reporting. The U.S. urges Israel against Gaza ground invasion, pushes surgical campaign. U.S. officials say a full-scale ground invasion risks a wider Middle East war and jeopardizes the lives of hundreds of hostages. That is according to the Washington Post. Is it safe to say? I mean, can I make this assumption? And it's just an assumption on my part, but is it safe to say that the U.S. knew what was going to happen yesterday? I mean, that they were consulted or tipped off that this massive strike was going to take place? Because you get various reports which claim that not even the U.S. was briefed on what happened yesterday evening, these massive bombings and airstrikes on Gaza. But I mean, can I make that assumption that the U.S. was consulted about this? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. Kirby, he told the media yesterday, the press in the White House yesterday, that there are no red lines for Israel. Anything goes, according to Kirby. So that's not good. No red lines for Israel. Saudi Arabia, Iran, they sent out warnings to the United States. Stop this escalation. The New York Times, I think it is the New York Times, they reported that last week in Saudi Arabia, Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal, they met with MBS, and MBS told the two senators that the U.S. should find a way to de-escalate in the Middle East, should stop its support for Israel, this blank check type of support for Israel. There's no red lines. There's no red line support for Israel because, according to MBS, according to this report, and I think it was the New York Times, I could be wrong, either the New York Times or Washington Post, according to this article, MBS told Graham and Blumenthal that if this continues and the ground operation does get started, we are looking at a catastrophe in the Middle East. A much bigger and wider war is going to take place. That was MBS's warning to Graham and Blumenthal. But I mean, we're talking about Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal, Richard Blumenthal. I mean, these are the biggest warmongers in the Senate, and MBS is telling them to de-escalate. These guys are going to Saudi Arabia in order to push for escalation. I'm positive that they met with MBS to try and get MBS to agree to be on board with an attack against Iran. I'm positive that is why they went to see MBS. And I imagine that MBS told them, given this article and this report, I imagine that MBS told them, guys, this is crazy. we're going to enter into a huge, massive war if this continues. And I bet you he sent Graham and Blumenthal on their way. He said no. I bet you that's what MBS said. That he doesn't want to get involved in a conflict with Iran or in Syria or a wider war or whatever these guys are cooking up. It seems like MBS is like, stop. The Iranian foreign minister, he gave an interview to Bloomberg TV, and the Iranian foreign minister, he also said that the United States needs to de-escalate. He said that the United States should not continue to get involved in this conflict, should try to find a way to detach from its no red line support of Israel. This is pretty much, I'm paraphrasing what he said to Bloomberg, but he said that the U.S. should not get involved in this. It's going to open up all kinds of different fronts, not only in the Middle East, but in towards the U.S. It's going to open up all kinds of different fronts, and they need to find a way to de-escalate and to convince Israel to de-escalate. That was pretty much the warning from the Iranian foreign minister during this interview on Bloomberg. Stop and de-escalate. Otherwise, we're heading towards a catastrophe. And so at the UN, the General Assembly, they had a vote, a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire and humanitarian aid into Gaza. And in this vote, you had 120 countries vote in favor of this resolution. You had 45 countries abstain, and you had 14 countries actually say no to this resolution. Incredible, huh? 14 countries actually voted against a ceasefire and humanitarian aid to Gaza. Unbelievable. An unbelievable development. The countries that voted against this resolution are Austria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Fiji, Guatemala, Hungary, Israel, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Nauru, Papua New Guinea, Paraguay, Tonga, and the USA. By the way, Israel, they actually said after this vote, they said that the UN lost its legitimacy after the adoption of the Middle East resolution in the General Assembly. That is what Israel's permanent representative to the UN said after this vote. But Austria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Hungary, they voted against this resolution, against a ceasefire and humanitarian aid. And then you had countries abstaining like Greece, Germany, Cyprus. And, you know, when a country votes to abstain from a resolution like this, it's basically a country saying, you know, we would vote no, but the political fallout from doing such a thing is just too much. So best that we abstain. That's usually what happens when they abstain from a resolution like this, calling for a ceasefire and humanitarian aid. For example, Greece. Greece abstained, right? They didn't vote in favor of this resolution. And I'm sure that the U.S. Government, they put a tremendous amount of pressure on Greece, right? I'm positive that they put a ton of pressure on Greece to vote no against this resolution. But I'm positive that Greece, they told the U.S., look, if we vote against this resolution, we're going to have 200,000 people in the streets protesting. So cut us some slack and let us get by with an abstain. And the U.S. said, okay. And Cyprus, the same situation. This is off the record. This is what I think is happening behind the scenes. I'll tell you what these countries are saying officially as to why they voted no or as to why they abstained. I'll tell you what they're saying on the record, but off the record, that's what I think happened. And the same for Germany, the same for Cyprus, and all the countries that abstained, and even the countries that voted against this resolution, that voted no for a ceasefire and for humanitarian aid into Gaza. The countries that voted no, take for example Hungary. I bet you Hungary was going to the United States. I bet you the U.S. approached Hungary. I bet you the U.S. approached Hungary, and they were like, "Look, you guys are going against the grain on everything when it comes to Ukraine. So what we'll do is we'll let that slide, right?" I bet you they told Hungary, "We'll let that slide. We won't come down on you hard with some of the decisions you've been making with regards to Project Ukraine, but in order for us to not pressure you on that side, you have to vote with us on this resolution." I'm sure there was some sort of diplomacy and horse trading that took place between Hungary and the United States, and that's why they voted against this resolution. So I'm sure there was a lot of, I guess you could say, negotiating, carrot and stick, from the U.S. towards these countries so that they can vote the way they did. I think Iraq is the one outlier. I think Iraq, in the beginning, actually voted to abstain, and then they changed their vote to be in favor of this resolution. And the reason that Iraq gave for the first vote, which was to abstain, was because they said that the resolution, I think they said the resolution called Israel a country, and that's what they took issue with. But I think Iraq was like the only outlier of all of this as to why they voted to abstain. Now, on the record, the countries that voted against this resolution and voted to abstain, what they are saying is that they voted no or abstain because they claim that the resolution wasn't balanced. It was not a balanced resolution. And they say that because, according to some officials from these countries, the resolution did not condemn Hamas. And let me give you a case in point. Here's a case in point from Cyprus. Okay, here's what Cyprus, the Cyprus foreign minister said. Foreign ministry, this is what they said with regards to this resolution. Quote, "We wanted to show balance. There were some countries, many from the Arab world, which were on one side of the argument, and others, such as the United States, which were on the other. We wanted to maintain our balanced stance. We felt that in such a resolution, there should be a condemnation of the instigators. There was no mention of Hamas in the resolution." So on the record, what all these countries are going to say, the foreign ministries, they're going to say that we abstained or we voted against this resolution because it wasn't balanced and there was no condemnation of Hamas. Off the record, I think we all know there was all kinds of negotiations and diplomacy and carrot and stick, and the U.S. putting pressure on them, and there was give and take, and some countries, they had to vote no, and other countries, they managed to convince the United States to let them get by with an abstain. So that was the vote in the UN. Either way, 120 for the resolution is a defeat for the United States. It still is a defeat for the U.S. So look, that's the situation there. Is this the beginning of the ground operation? Is this something else? What took place yesterday, the horrifying events, horrifying bombing of Gaza that took place yesterday? I don't know. I really, really do not know.
Alex,
Yes.
I'm a great fan of you.
Oh.
I'm watching the Duran almost every day.
Oh, great.
It's an honor to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to meet you.
I appreciate your work, and also from Alexander Mercouris.
Alexander Mercouris.
Yeah,
Great.
Duran, and
Awesome.
really, you're doing an awesome job.
Thank you very much.
So,
I will give Alexander best.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for the support.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I know you are working.
Oh, yeah, I'm doing a video right now.
But it's really, you are doing an excellent job, and it's so good that you bring light into the darkness. Or you try.
Difficult times.
Yes.
Very difficult times, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get by. We'll get by. I don't know how, but we'll see.
That's the cycle of the world.
Well said.
repeats itself.
Well said.
Yeah.
All right.
But
Great.
I let you work.
Thank
And
you.
Take
Thank
care.
you very
Bye.
much. Take care. So, yeah. I don't know if this is the ground operation or not. I really do not know. Uh, Analysts say this is, other analysts say this isn't. The IDF, they're hinting that this isn't. The Biden White House, according to the collectivist media, they're telling Israel to not go ahead with the ground operation. They're kind of hinting at the fact that they had nothing to do with everything that happened yesterday. I don't know. The media blackout, this media blackout makes it very, very difficult to understand what is going on, whether it's on the ground, like the military movements and everything taking place there, or even the diplomacy. It's hard to get a feel of an understanding of what is going on, which, as I said in the beginning of my video, is very different than the conflict in Ukraine and the special military operation, where we essentially had full transparency, and we continue to have full transparency. So that's the latest there. It was a very depressing evening yesterday, to be honest. But anyway, let's let's shift gears. Let's talk about Ukraine, because the Associated Press they they reported. There's an interesting article from the Associated Press, an interesting report from the AP. They reported that during the EU summit, Project Ukraine was nowhere to be found, pretty much. They're saying that the European Union and EU officials, they had no interest in discussing Project Ukraine at the latest EU summit, which just wrapped up the other day. And basically, what the Associated Press is reporting is that the first day Zelensky addressed the EU, a virtual like video address. But after that, the AP is reporting that the EU didn't even discuss Project Ukraine, and the only thing they discussed was the war in Israel and Gaza. That was it. That's what the AP is reporting. And then on the final day, the AP reports on the final day they took up Project Ukraine once again, but only to vote on the 53 billion for the Zelensky regime. That was it. And the AP is reporting, as we all know by now, that the 53 billion did not get approved because it needs the approval of all 27 member states, and Hungary and Slovakia, they said no. So the AP basically is saying that this summit was a disaster for the Zelensky regime and for Project Ukraine, a complete disaster. The EU is just disinterested in Project Ukraine, if you can put it like that. And they didn't really even discuss it or talk about it. So not only has the media dropped Project Ukraine, but the United States, obviously, and even the EU is starting to distance itself from Project Ukraine. And why did Hungary and Slovakia not approve the 53 or 55 billion that they wanted to give to the Zelensky regime? Well, Slovakia, Fico, he said that he's not going to approve 50 plus billion to Ukraine because he said that Ukraine is corrupt. He just flat out said it. Said, I'm not going to give them 50 billion because they're corrupt. That's what he pretty much said. And Orban said that he's not going to approve the money to Ukraine because Orban said that this conflict is over. I mean, that's pretty much what Orban said. Let me read you what Orban said, actually. The Ukrainians are not going to win on the battlefield. The Russians are not going to lose on the battlefield. There's no way that the Russian president will be defeated in Moscow in the chaos of a lost war. That's what Orban said. That's why he's not approving the 53 billion to Ukraine. Why give 50 billion to a side that is not going to win and that has lost? Why do it, he said. It's a waste of money, pretty much, is what he's saying. And Fico is just like, They're corrupt. Quote, this is what Slovakia said, quote, Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. That's what he said. Unbelievable. He said, we're ready to help, but not militarily, because I do not believe in a military solution of this conflict in Ukraine. So that is what Slovakia said. It's all very bad news for the Zelensky regime. And because everything is going very, very bad for the Zelensky regime, Zelensky yesterday, he came out with a statement and said that in the southern direction, the big super duper counteroffensive, Zaporozhye, Rabotinye, Verbove, in that direction, Zelensky said operational pause. The Ukraine military is now in an operational pause. And Zelensky said they're in an operational pause because of uncertainty. They don't know if they're going to get more weapons and more money, and he just doesn't know. I mean, Ukraine now is actually like, they're putting out advertisements, like very slick productions, advertisements trying to convince women to go to the front lines. That's how bad it is getting for the Zelensky regime. But, this admission from Zelensky, this operational pause in the south, is the closest we've seen the Zelensky regime come to saying that the big super duper spring, summer, winter, fall counteroffensive that offends me and offends you and offends everybody is over. Zelensky himself is pretty much admitting it. The first time we've seen him come is just like one step away from saying we failed. He can't say it. He's saying operational pause because of uncertainty, but it's an admission of failure from Zelensky. And of course, the EU officials, they see the statement and they're like, yeah, this Project Ukraine is what did Duda say? This Project Ukraine is like a drowning man pulling us down. I think that's pretty much the sentiment and the feeling throughout all of Europe at this point in time. The only thing they can do, the United States and the European Union, the only thing they can do for Project Ukraine at this moment is give it money so that it can try to last for however long it can last. That's the strategy. Give it 60 billion here, 50 billion there, and just hold out as long as you can. In the United States, in the case of the US, it's the Biden White House saying, look, keep the Russians occupied, keep them distracted from the Middle East, hold out until after the elections, here's 60 billion, and just go away. That's all they can do at this moment because it's clear that all of the US's attention is now focused on the Middle East and a war with a possible, God help us, God forbid, a possible US war with Iran and Syria. And as MBS told Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal, a catastrophic war in the Middle East. That's where the US's attention is now focused towards. They have the aircraft carrier group. The Ford is in the Mediterranean. Today, the Eisenhower arrived into the Mediterranean. Today, Eisenhower aircraft carrier and that whole group arrived into the Mediterranean. And we have the Lincoln and the Roosevelt. They left their port in San Diego, I believe, and they're on their way to somewhere. Where that somewhere is, I don't know. Maybe they're going to the Pacific. Maybe they're going towards Taiwan. Most likely they're heading towards the Middle East. And if that is the case, then we're looking at an absolutely massive military buildup in the Middle East. And Biden, he sent a letter to Congress explaining his strike on Syria the other day. And he said that this was defensive. And that's why he ordered the strike. And he basically argued that it was within his power as president of the United States to defend U.S. troops because they were attacked by drones or missiles from territory in Syria. And so it was within his power to order the United States to strike Syria. It was all done in self-defense, according to Professor Biden, and it's all within his power as president of the United States. And so Lavrov, let me get you this quote from Lavrov. Lavrov said that access to direct negotiations on the creation of two states of Palestine and Israel is now hardly achievable. The destruction of the Gaza Strip and the expulsion of 2 million inhabitants from the enclave will create a catastrophe for many decades, if not centuries. So that's a statement from Lavrov. And finally, Lukashenko, he weighed in on Project Ukraine and the conflict in Ukraine. And Lukashenko basically is urging the Zelensky regime to surrender, to call an end to this conflict, call up China, get China to mediate, get to some sort of peace in order to save whatever is left of Ukraine. That is what Lukashenko said in a statement to the media yesterday, because according to Lukashenko, even if Ukraine gets 50 billion from the EU, even if they get 61 billion from the United States, even if they get more weapons from the collective West, according to Lukashenko, the one thing that Ukraine cannot get is more soldiers, more men to fight. And Lukashenko is basically saying that Ukraine is running out of men, period, running out of men. And he said that you're going to end up with a situation where Ukraine has these weapons and this money, specifically these weapons, given to it by the collective West, and they're not going to have any men to use these weapons. Quote, the most dangerous thing for Ukraine is that it will have weapons, but no one to use them, Lukashenko told reporters in Minsk when asked about the conflict on his southern border. We've seen what has happened there at the start. These, ideological people, these nationalists, they fought. Where are they? Practically all of them have died or been crippled. He said that people are fleeing from Ukraine. No one wants to fight. So Lukashenko is telling Ukraine, he said, quote, wise men in Kiev should call for peace and negotiate before they lose everything. So that's the message from the leader of Belarus. And let's do a clown world and we will wrap this Saturday video up. And this clown world is courtesy of Boris Johnson once again, back-to-back clown worlds from Bojo. And the news is that GBTV, a very popular media and television channel in the UK, GBTV, they have signed up Boris Johnson for his own television show. Boris Johnson, after everything he has done, he is getting a TV show with GB News. Pretty incredible. And Nigel Farage, he weighed in on this. And Farage, he actually welcomed this development. Farage actually welcomed this development. And let me cross and I'll find the quote. All right, I've got the quote from Farage ready before I cross. All right. Okay, so here is what Farage said. I think he will be highly entertaining, and that is perhaps an understatement. That was Farage's statement with regards to Boris Johnson getting a show on GB News. GB TV, Boris Johnson's new show. I wonder what they're going to call it. Clown World with Bojo? The Warmonger Hour with Boris Johnson. Oh boy. Anyway, that's the video, everybody. The Duran.lopez.com. We are on Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X, and go to the Duran shop. 20% off. Use the code TheDuran20. Take care. What everyone is looking at over there. Let's see what everyone is staring at down there. It's like they're shooting a movie. Interesting. Take care.